The only games with Batman Arkham combat mechanics I've enjoyed so far have been the Batman Arkham themselves, and it's mostly because of their somewhat decent scoring system. To many of you, it might sound superficial, but to me, it makes those fights engaging, because it somewhat solves the fundamental issue of such simple fighting mechanics, the fucking skill ceiling being only 2 inches above the skill floor. Unlike surviving, or even not taking hit, which are objectives that you either succeed or fail reaching, you can always aim for a better score. You might first try to get the perfect shell, then aim to get the max possible bonus for using all of your moves. And even when you're able to do all this, for like all the 4 fights of the typical combat challenge, you can still do better by milking every enemy as much as possible. As you progress, the mental load increases, and because the amount of points you're rewarded with is exponential, your adrenaline level gets off the roof towards the end, which is obviously a pretty addicting situation to be in. Now the big flaw of this scoring system, and for some reason they never corrected it, despite making 4 games, is a move called the reorientation, which is the move where your superhero just vault over an enemy's head. Whenever you need more time to plan your next course of action, you can just do that. No enemy punishes it, it prevents you from losing your shell, and during the move's animation, you're free to think carefully about what you should do next. Because of this very move, world record runs are as tactical as they are long and boring to watch. However, there is a combat challenge in City called the Joker's Carnival. In this one you start with 3 minutes on the clock, and you rack up points by hitting enemies. At any moment during the fight, you can trade those points for additional seconds. You will get more or less depending on how much points you bank. Get hit and you lose everything, obviously. Even if you're good, you can't go on forever like this, so it forces the player to play things fast, without using the orientation, or at least with using it as little as possible, since it's dead time. Here time is the missing ingredient. Time alone perfectly balances the orientation. With this change, no need to make any further adjustment, like nerf this move or make the enemies adapt to it. But because the enemies are, in this specific challenge, unlimited, it's no longer interesting to think about variation bonuses or to milk the enemies. It's a complete shift of gameplay with pros and cons. So why this talk? Because it brings all the points I want to develop in this video. First, scoring adds an optional tension where there no longer was any, either because the game was too easy for you from the start, or because you mastered it. Second, scoring adds depth by creating a new set of rules that will affect the overall balance of the game, especially in games that aren't restrictive enough. Third, scoring can help the creators funnel the player in an intended way to play the game. In our example, having a nice, very cinematic battle where you flow from one enemy to the others without interruption, using all of your gadgets and moves. Fourth, scoring gives a purpose with no boundaries, a reason to keep improving at your favorite games outside speedrunning. It's adaptive difficulty at its best. Speedrunning is a nice goal in itself, but will make you heavily lean toward platforming stuffs, because the best speedrunning routes have you avoid whole portion of the games, and or as many enemies as you can, and or a whole portion of your moveset. And it doesn't match with auto-scrolling genres very well, which is why shmups, runners, rigged games, light gun shooters, all these kind of games always have a scoring system in place. So shmups have used scoring system to expand their replayability since forever actually. It started with simple things like kill as many enemies as you can, forcing you to expose yourself more, and became more and more sophisticated. Let's take one of the best shmup in the genre. Gunvan's most simple survival strat is to half-bomb every time you feel cornered. But if you want to show the rest of the world how much you work, you don't want to do that. You want to accumulate enemies on screen and full bomb their asses. On bosses, you're going to use them as a finishing blow, and not as an auto-escape move. You end up exploiting this useful resource in a different way, and by doing that, you might like it when you need to survive. On top of that, you're going to want to accumulate this resource faster, which means playing much higher on the screen, killing enemies right as they appear, which feels like a risky position, and is. The player has to constantly balance what would be the best course of action to survive, and what would be optimal to score depending on the situation, his needs, and of course his skills. It's a pretty common dynamic in the genre. A more extreme example will be Psyvaria Revision. Unlike in Gunvan, by default, the enemies are not constantly invading your space and forcing you toward a more aggressive screen controlling playstyle, and the patterns aren't aimed at stripping you of screen space until you're cornered and forced to bomb. Playing for survival actually feels pretty lame. This is where the scoring system comes to the rescue. If you want a good score, you have to graze bullets, which in turn raise a leveling gauge. Once full, you get a second of invulnerability, which you can exploit to position yourself in a way that will let you graze even better and score even more. This, in turn, reestablishes a tactical balance between survival and scoring. Grazing and leveling non-stop at the center of the screen is highly rewarded and rewarding, but also highly risky. The difference between life and death might just be to show some restraint, to refrain from scoring for a few seconds as your leveling gauge is almost full, so you can pass a new level right as the patterns become too much for you to handle. The overall difficulty is up to the player and how much cocky he feels. But how far can you replace something the gameplay doesn't bring with straight out scoring though? In the recent Double Dragon Gaiden, Rise of the Dragons, there is no natural incentive to crowd control. Enemies can keep up with you, you can just as easily isolate them or kill them one by one as they go, so long as you still pay attention to the rest of the screen. You also have very poor active mechanics to group them. However, the dev is probably conscious of the interesting tactical decisions crowd control has always brought to the genre, and he used the game's scoring system as a way to reward group kills like crazy. Kill 3 or more enemies at the same time with a special attack and now you have a free health item, which would convert into money if you had full health, so pretty much all the time since the game is dead easy anyway, at least up until the very end. This money then converts into tokens, the metric used in the overall ranking, with an exchange rate affected by the difficulty settings. The intention is nice, but the problem comes from how you're going to crowd control in Gaiden. By just moving around those stupid enemies, like just running past them until they're all nicely paired together. It's that dumb. The thing is, because of this fucking scoring system, we had such nice intentions at first. I mean, how bad can it be to try bringing back some crowd control element in a bad scoring beat 'em up, right? The scoring system should receive gentle pats in the back, not blame. But because of it, the action is now interrupted every time as you're just playing the fucking shepherd's dog running around the ships until they're neatly grouped up. Where's the pressure? Where's the desperate need to act fast and aggressive to survive against overwhelming odds? So even if they throw food, points and strippers at you for fucking grouping your foes, you still group less than in something like Mayan Border, where they give you shit for that, but you fucking have to because of something mind-blowing called enemy design and gameplay mechanics. On top of that, it undermines the difficulty curve. Outside the big shock point towards the very end, the moment where the game seems to be the coolest is when it keeps sending enemies 2 by 2, because then you can't get health items. The more enemies it sends to you, the less you are afraid of missing health. Unlike in my previous examples, in Gaiden, you score to survive, which brings down the skill ceiling both by scoring considerably. Don't tie them together, make them conflicting. Without such scoring mechanic in place, would Double Dragon Gaiden have been a better game? I'm not sure. It's in dear need of mechanical adjustments or another scoring system. I truly believe you could take something like Shredder's Revenge, no, maybe not Shredder's Revenge, that's a lost cause, but like the Takeover, and still make it somehow fun with an insane scoring system. It's obvious that the Double Dragon Gaiden dev wants to push the player toward a more controlling, tactical gameplay with his system, just like it tried to and failed to as well in Streets of Rage. Now if the intended way to play will be to the test of the players, as another matter. Take Ninja Gaiden 2 for instance. UT spam is the best strategy survival-wise, but it's also the best strategy scoring-wise. Except it's so unfun that all those little Ninja Gaiden 2 cheerleaders out there are like, my body, my rules, and scream their fucking no UT spam tagline to whoever is not self-expressing himself enough by not playing in the most unoptimized way. This poses a fundamental issue. Without score to improve, you're lacking meaning beyond survival. Who plays Ninja Gaiden for survival anyway? Noobs? You don't want to belong there, trust me. Even playing mission mode for fun will feel frustrating as you'll now, despite expressing yourself in such a stylish way, be at the bottom of the ranking, where you deserve to be for not playing that game the fucking intended way. But some shit you don't see in the first 3D Ninja Gaiden, where all the chads are, because of a rule they forgot to preserve into called, can you guess? Time limit. Because you sometimes have such a stupidly limited amount of time to dispose of your opponents, you now have to spam the shit out of UTs like there's no tomorrow, cause that's the fucking most efficient way to kill a Ninja Gaiden. More seriously though, the time limit does prevent, to some extent, the most degenerative effect of the UTs. You can't just flee around and hide behind corners charging like a little bitch without touching a score. Sometimes you can't even afford the UT's animation length, so you'll have to settle for a simple lesson stack. Including time and rewarding the players not only for matching but exceeding its requirement is an excellent way to force a more aggressive, riskier playstyle and soften the impact of any quad strat, a game I love. But the thing with UT spam in the engines is that it really was intended, and pushed, a lot. It wasn't because they didn't care, or because they didn't think the game would play like that, the opposite actually. They finally tuned each time limit, for each encounter, but also each stage clear time, even taking the fin challenge into account, and also the number of enemies you have to kill for the maximum bonus on each stage. They devised a way to deal with respawning fights. They made your overall score clear and uploadable, which is surprisingly uncommon for this type of games. And they even organized the biggest scoring event I can think of for a 3D action game with a final show at the TGS. After that, not quite satisfied yet, they released 2 awesome DLCs that both affected their previous scoring system. Everyone remembers them as the pre-era of Ninja Gaiden, but that's also when you started to receive additional points for performing UTs. Arriving at black and now trying to squeeze as many UTs as you can in every single fight has become the path for very high scores. But the fact that there's a main focus of the scoring system into is just a logical continuity. UT spam was the Itagaki's wet dream, I mean, after Kazumi of course. Why do you think they went from being 3-5 seconds long to lasting such a fucking ass long time into? In that context, the scoring system works as intended, pushing everyone who don't like it towards self-imposed challenge. But without it, that franchise would have just lost one of the most memorable parts of its history. Now change the vision behind that franchise, put a man in charge with a deep hatred for Itagaki, and what do you have? Your self-imposed challenge becoming acknowledged by a very effective scoring. When Hayashi took over, he nerfed UT using every fucking lever at his disposal, including, of course, scoring. UT is your banking move in Resource Edge. Your karma multiplier is reset the moment you perform that technique. He also reduced their length drastically, put the whole essence system afuera, tweaked the enemy's AI to make them less susceptible to get hit by this technique, but that's another matter entirely. Just the scoring system was a bold and big enough move. Now whether you share one vision or the other is up to you. You see, the good point with scoring is that it can make any self-imposed challenge part of the game in a much more progressive and rewarding way. Let's take a franchise very famous for self-imposed challenges. Imagine if, in the Resident Evil, there was a proper scoring system in place. Imagine if every time you access your cache, your score would be halved. Imagine if every time you damaged an enemy with an upgraded weapon, you'd incur a scoring penalty. Imagine if all your melee attacks would give twice or thrice the amounts of points compared to your other weapons. All of these propositions encourage the most popular self-imposed challenge in those games. No cache run, no upgrade run, knife only run, and on top of that they bring 3 new things. The player is rewarded by his very game for mastering it in this way, and ideally he'll be able to compare the size of his dick with the other community members. It lends a hand to all the lazy ones out there who might be interested to replay these games in a more challenging way, but needs the advertisement. It basically highlights these more challenging playstyles. And third, it's more progressive. You're not breaking any rule by opening a cache, or killing a tofu with your magnum, or upgrading your precious shotgun in prevision of a difficult section. You'll just end up with a lesser score. Said score might still become your new PB. How much you dip into this challenge is your choice, based on your investment, personal skills and tactics. In the end, you still have something to look for, an incentive to play the game again and improve, while still finding enough challenge and competition to make it fun. Speaking of the Resident Evil, a scoring system can just as well backfire if it doesn't account for the game's strengths. In the original Resident Evil 4 Mercenaries mode, the players are rewarded for being able to kill a lot of enemies in a short amount of time. It was focused on GPS. With most weapons you're going to shoot people in the torso, as it's much more reliable, or you're going to throw grenades, but you don't engage with a lot of the game's more interesting mechanics. You won't use the localized stun system or the contextual melees, because if you do, you're just going to kill your enemies at a slow rate. You're going to end up with a lesser score. What can the player do to enhance his enjoyment then? Play by his own rules, restrict himself to a certain playstyle. He can, for instance, favors contextual melee moves every time he can. But because the only metric he has to judge is performance, score, will reward him for failing to do that. Because he has ultimately no goal to pursue, his game loses the natural characteristic of a game, the rules, and becomes just a tool. Thankfully God saw this, took notice and corrected it in its new creation. So when it gave birth to Resident Evil 5, it added 2 new rules. Every melee kills will be worth 5 more seconds, and every second left at the end of the game will be worth your weight in gold. And God saw that it was good, and unfortunately rested on its ass since then. The simple rules made all the change in the world, pushing the players to fully use the strengths of a generation of Resident Evil, play in a more fulfilling way, be punished for getting back to survival, as overkills and fleeing would cost him points, be rewarded for good tactical planning, such as softening multiple grouped enemies for a melee attack now worth twice or 3 times more points. So some of you might say, but personally, I don't care about scoring. I just want to play my games one time in the lamest possible way and enjoy them visually. Or I just want to immerse myself in their world, imagine, invent, self-express myself. I'm fine with them being more like toys, for lacking a cumbersome set of rules. Well, child, I've got a good news for you. You don't have to look at it, you're not forced to engage with it. You can be your own bland self, totally lacking charismatic characteristics. And when you're ready to grow the fuck up and enjoy game mechanics in a more controlled way, with a more focused objective, it's there, opening its arms for you. Plus it's so easy to implement, I know for a fact, having never developed any game in my life. The most improbable games could benefit from a scoring system. An open-world action RPG focused on exploration? Why not? You must have read people commenting on Elden Ring how true Souls fans don't use summons, don't go out of their way farming, engage in melee combat, avoid taking damage. How about a scoring system that rewards you for playing like that? That's not how you enjoy Elden Ring? Then for you it doesn't change a thing. For those who keep replaying this ass-long game to master whatever there is to master in it, they can now have a canvas to work with, goals to beat, ways to compare their new run bit with their previous one, or with the communities. For this to work, devs need to be more forward with their scoring system. It doesn't have to be in the face of those who are not interested, but people need to be aware it's there, need to understand its rules, and ideally should be able to compare themselves to the rest of the community. That's how you end up with a non-competitive, immersive AAA game about Batman having its overall rankings absolutely crowded. Why do you think the first Ninja Gaiden is pretty much the only fucking 3D beat 'em up, or whatever your generation called them nowadays, that the community was interested to score? So many of them have some form of scoring system. It's the fact that Team Ninja highlighted it, worked on it, something they were too lazy to do later on outside the alternate missions and challenges we will see appear in 2 and 3. Someone passionate about Ninja Gaiden knows a relevant score is at least 8 digits long. Most action games with a scoring system don't even give values, they just reward with a title, a rank, something that has a strict and usually very low ceiling. Who would score Ninja Gaiden, Resident Evil Mercenaries mode or Streets of Rage 4 if the best thing they could reach for was an S plus master something rank? Which brings me to another point, they give the best rank to literally everyone on their first days of trying. In fighting games, only the top 500 or something can expect to reach true good rival level. So don't give ranks or give a shit ton of them, preferably the latter as noobs love them. A scoring system should be part of every video game. If not for all the things it can help the designers achieve, at least to provide a never achievable goal. The constant quest for a better score. That used to be a core philosophy, before we perverted it, replaced it with petty addiction-based mechanics, preying on our most shameful weaknesses, our desire to accumulate wealth, loot, skins, power, something that can only grow up and that they will never cease to increase. Let's get conscious of that. Let's get back to playing for the sake of playing, because that very act is fun, and protest against those who treat us for what we truly are.
Animals.